Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. Once again, temporary name. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dispatches from Elsewhere. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I really like this episode. Let us get an opportunity to kind of see the production side of this whole operation, because we even got started with when they're recruiting the actors who were going to be Commander 14 and Octavio. Obviously they were, auditioning a whole bunch of twins and stuff like that. But I thought it was kind of interesting, our insight getting to see, it is kind of what I thought it was. Because I was thinking, I thought that this entire game was Lee's way of kind of paying tribute to Clara, that this was making up for whatever mistake she kind of blamed herself for, or whatever the case may be. And it turns out to be that, I like that the fact is we see the original folders for the Elsewhere and the Jejune. It's no, don't make it red and blue. That makes it seem like such a political thing. And this Sasquatch outfit, we could do better. So certain details, and it's that's not a dolphin, that's a porpoise. And it's I got these photos for you, but I will let you know ahead of time, half of them are porpoises. So it's stuff like that, the little technical issues and stuff like that. And it's so interesting because I think she latched on to four people in particular. It does seem like Peter, Fredwin, Simone, and Janice. And we got to finally see Simone, Janice, and Fredwin's what we saw with Peter, his little one-on-one with Octavio in that room with the television and everything. We got to see everyone else's interactions with that, because I love Simone being is this a sex code or something? I'm gonna be mad if it turns out to be this turns into a sex thing after this. She's I'm gonna be pissed. And then the fact is Fredwin's well, there's only certain acknowledgments, either kind of a yes or a no, or a yes then a no. When Janet's just okay, she's the one that's just kind of oh, that sounds like fun, so okay, debating with herself about the whole situation. So that was kind of fascinating. But also seeing over the course of, because I even love that Octavio at the beginning kind of goes hey, you might have noticed Lee, she's not just a background character. She's popped up no less than 3 times, no more than 5 times. Because she actually popped up one more time than I remembered. Like I said, I remembered the one where she kind of tells Fairwin to hush, they show that in the recap. I didn't remember the other time when she was standing beside me. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's oh, that was kind of neat for them to show. Okay, so that was one I didn't account for. But nevertheless, that not everything went according to plan, because Fredwin, it's wait, she's oh, we're kind of behind schedule. Wait, he just climbed in the damn trunk. It's well, what's the worst that he can do type of situation? So it's interesting. They're constantly having to develop the, obviously, she is the one that pushed for Janice, because they had a different plant set up ahead of time with someone to go on stage and stuff like that, but she was pushing for Jen. She's yes, and so I think kind of spending time with them. I think Peter's the one that kind of, because when she saw Peter's reaction, I think these 4 in particular, all of their reactions kind of set her off to be oh, this is interesting. So, but basically bit by bit, they were kind of going off script a little bit, because it's wait, they showed up, at her, it's wait, what people are here? And it turns out that wasn't her kid, that was one of the people working for her. It's I think a babysitter situation fell through. But I love the milkman comes over and he's yeah, they actually found your real place. And it's well, they probably won't. And it's don't worry, they won't actually go there. He's actually, I'm really nervous because he's basically I'm lying because I'm nervous. Actually, they're totally going to go there. So she smashed up her place to kind of keep the game going, because basically they almost ruined the game, their way of taking it so seriously, because they were beginning to think it was serious, which technically it was. But when it was all said and done, Lee changed everything the moment she saw Peter on stage being no, he knows the truth behind everything, that there's a real Clara and everything. Because I love when she was smashing up her place, why won't you let me give you a damn, let me give you a damn magical experience? Because for her, this whole thing means so much, because it's her way kind of paying tribute to Clara, and it's everything has to be perfect. She's been working so hard at this, and it's even with, and that whole thing with Octavio at the beginning saying even you worry that even when you've done everything right, that basically it still won't amount to anything, it won't matter, because basically she's the one that's Bender Elmore, she's the head of the company and everything. That's why she's able to kind of do and construct everything she's done, because she made the company a crap ton of money and stuff like that. She has everything she would want, but it still didn't kind of feel that emptiness kind of in her, which is very reflective of our main group of characters, because they all have something that they're trying to like feel kind of an emptiness in each one of them in certain shape or form, you know, to a certain extent. So I think there's an interesting, I've used this word in a previous review, but synergy, but like there's this connectivity like between Lee, and I guess that's kind of the whole point, is to, you know, because Lee ends up basically pointing them in the right direction of like, okay, we have to look here, here, and here about this whole situation, because it's like, Lee points him in the direction when it comes to the whole Clara situation. So basically they show up, and I love the whole like Peter and Simone thing. I'm like, oh, you two are so goddamn adorable. I was like, stop being so damn adorable. But the fact of the matter is, I love for everyone's like, okay, you look over there, you go look over there. Simone, you go over to those goth kids. And then Simone's like, Fredwin, that's a funeral. But they end up finding the tomb, and there's like papers and a recording of the real Clara. It turns out Clara was sadly only like 20 when she died. Essentially, like, basically, it's like, she was like, I don't know which comes first. What was I like, the, you know, the not being happy or the being lonely? And so obviously at first she wanted to kind of share like her work, you know, to kind of make the world beautiful. But it's like, more so than anything, like for her, it took her a while for her to kind of realize what was kind of the most important thing in this situation, and that was like the connectedness, the others of this, kind of being connected with other people. And so that is what it is what like Simone was suggesting, like, oh yeah, like the entire experience was about bringing people together, because that's what Clara wanted. And so Lee, you know, because we find out because of, you know, Lee ended up buying the company, Clara's company, like all those ideas and stuff like that. The whole balance between the Jejune Institute wanting just to steal Clara's idea, whereas Clara's, you know, the Elsewhere Society was like, no, let her, you know, her ideas run free. It's literally, I think, a struggle that Lee has, because she kind of chose the business side of like, she's the one that convinced Clara to sell the company, and Clara died 6 months later, you know, and it's like, whether it was like a direct situation, they never explained how she died, whether it was like maybe she committed, like, the fact is they say it like that makes it almost like, that's why I'm like, did she kill herself? Because that's probably why Lee, because I was like, why would Lee feel responsible otherwise? So it has to be a thing of maybe she killed herself and Lee feels responsible, like, because I took away what was important to her. I basically monetize her ideas she had that she wanted to kind of like, you know, spark and share with people and bring people together. I took it and monetized it. I made it into a business. I sold those ideas for money. And so it's just basically Clara had to see what she cared about most, kind of basically mainstreamed and turned into, like, rather than it being for everyone, kind of like the Elsewhere Society wanted it to be, Lee kind of was more of the Jejune, had the more Jejune Institute type of approach to it. And that's kind of her biggest regret. And I love that the lady that's at the place is like, the Continental is like, so, and she's explaining basically what happened. And it's like, you guys almost basically ruined the game, but she felt so bad about the fact that you guys took the game so seriously that she decided to write a new ending for it. And they're like, yeah. She's like, actually, I'm going to miss eavesdropping on you guys. Because I was about to say, did they sit there and explain this whole thing to you? It's like, oh no, you've been just eavesdropping on their conversation. She's like, but Peter's like, no, don't worry. You can, you know, this isn't the end. I mean, we're all actually friends now, so we'll still continue to come here. And he didn't say this, but it's basically like, you can eavesdrop on us as much as you want to. I just love that was it. I thought they sat there and explained the whole thing. It's like, oh no, she's just been eavesdropping the entire time that they've been part of this whole game, and they'd come there to, you know, strategize and stuff. So we'll kind of start off with, like, you know, Peter and Simone's situation. Peter asking Simone on a date, and I mean, like, Fredwin, I mean, that's just meant for me and Simone. Like, I mean, you're a nice guy and everything. And Simone's like, yes, I'd love to. And it's like, yeah. And, you know, afterwards, Janice was like, oh, that's good, finally. And she's like, you too, I want to know all the details about the date afterwards. And so at first, it's like, you know, it's a really sweet date at first, because it's like, for Peter, it's a situation of like, you know, he's like, oh, I Googled the most like romantic restaurant, and this one had the most stars. And even Simone being like, I could lie and say, like, you know, there was other things, but she was like, I just couldn't decide what to wear. And he was like, you look beautiful. And it's like, I was like, oh, damn. I was like, stop being so adorable. I'm up there smiling and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, Peter, tell me some stuff about yourself. And it's like, he couldn't. I was like, she's like, it doesn't have to be big, just small. And he brings up the nosebleed situation. And she's like, oh, so what made it stop? He's like, no, it just kind of slowed down. It just happens anytime I get like super nervous or whatever, you know, it's when it kind of happens. And so it's like you want to kind of, he's like, I'm going to interject and say, like, obviously this isn't something he's really good at talking about himself. He hasn't really had to do it in a really, really long time. And so they suggested kind of getting out of there. So they picked up some sandwiches and they ate each other's sandwiches. Like, oh, how does it taste? It's like, oh, I'm sure they taste exactly the same. But then as the date goes on, you kind of get a little sad because you're like, oh, because she's asking him questions about what he prefers. It's like cake or pie. Like, Peter can't make a decision. Like, even simple stuff like that, like making a choice. Like, oh, like, you kind of hate picking one way or the other. I think I'm curious. Well, we'll kind of get to it later on, but I think Peter made himself like that just because it's like building up your own walls around yourself. Kind of, you basically, as Lee kind of puts it later on, you're a prison of your own making. So, but and as they're walking, these guys kind of look, and you can tell, like, I think you could see that look in Simone's eye, like she was getting self-conscious. And obviously, Peter was like, no, I'm working on it. I'm gonna get better at this whole date thing. I know it's not going well, but I will work at it. But for Simone, it's like, you don't really, like, I get it. Like, basically, you've taken steps and you're getting better at the whole, like, figuring yourself out thing. But for her, it's like, you don't really know what this relationship is like. Because the fact is, I think for Simone, it's a situation of, this is already a complicated situation because I'm a trans woman. And the fact of the matter is, I think, not necessarily like an uphill battle. It's just like, you are literally in the process of figuring yourself out. That's a lifetime thing. And I need someone who can be there for me. But she's like, you can't make a decision on the simplest thing. So it's just kind of like, can you really be there to kind of like, because this is not the easiest, relationship to be in. Because have you even really thought about our future together in that regard? Because it's like, that's something you'd always have to kind of deal with. It's like, because basically it's like, you haven't figured yourself out. And, Simone obviously is still, it's like, I think Simone's a little more set in who she is. At least the way she puts it, she's like, basically, I'm further ahead in this thing than you are. Because you are literally taking baby steps to figure yourself out. You're finally up to that point where you're starting to figure yourself out. I might not be 100% there, but at least, like, I'm quite a few steps ahead of you. So it's like, it's going to take time. The time you need to catch up to basically be where I am at even at where I'm at, would take years. So for her, it's like that they can't, he's sweet and everything, but she's like, I see the man that's like kind of underneath there who you could be, but it would take years for you to be that person. It's just a sad situation of, like, you can understand where Simone is coming from, where it's just like, you basically, like I said, just haven't figured yourself out yet. So, like, you can't really be there to kind of, it's a complicated situation. I mean, like any relationships are, complicated. Things aren't that simple. And it's like, oh, it's so sad because it was such a loving moment. But I think at the same time, this is a beautiful thing in itself. It's sucky. It's a very real thing, because it's just like relationships, it isn't a fairy tale. It isn't just like, oh, everything's going to click. Like, both of them have their own issues. And it's just kind of like those issues coming ahead in this moment right there. It's a very, very real thing. And I think I can sympathize on both instances to a certain extent, kind of like, because like I said, like, I feel like Peter and Simone, I mean, to be fair, the entire group, I feel like, at least for me, I feel like you can pull something from everyone. Peter, Janice, Simone, or even Fred, when, like, there are little bits and aspects of who they are, their personalities that kind of resonate with me, and I think can resonate with anyone watching the show. And so it's sad, and he's like, oh, how long will it take? And she's like, there's no, she's like, you're being literal. He's like, how long? A year? And she's like, sure. I immediately was thinking, like, so are we going to jump a year from now and Peter's going to be more together and be like, oh, I want to give this a shot now. Like, I'm a very different person. Like, I'm wondering, like, I think he's given himself a year to try and fix things, to change himself, to try and make this work, So it's kind of sad. And now, because they've taken that step further, like, it's going to complicate, like, it's going to make it's hard to go back to being friends when you've kind of, and that was always, like, Simone's fear of, like, kind of taking that step forward, because she doesn't want to ruin kind of what they have, like, So now it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of come true. But, I believe everything's going to work out in the end. So that's their side of things. The other side of things, we kind of rewind. Janice got a call about Lev, and so it turns into a whole situation of Fredwin showing up at the hospital because he pretty much figured what happened, and he wants to be there for Janice. He's like, I know I'm not very good with boundaries and stuff like that, but he's like, I wanted to be there for you. So obviously, it's like, it was very sweet. Like, the fact is that Fredwin would do that, because Fredwin from before, I don't think he would have done that. So kind of showing you like the fact is, you know, Peter and Simone, them taking the leap they were to go out on a date. That was a big step for both of them. And this is a big step for both Fredwin and Janice, I think, you know, in their relationship. And the fact of the matter is, you know, the fact is he wants to do whatever he can for her, but she's like, there's nothing you can do, because at the end of the day, she has to make the decision, like, that she basically has to, you know, take her husband off of life support, you know, and that's not an easy decision, and Fredwin's there to be there for her. It's like, you know, I heard it's good to talk to him, so it's like, oh, and does he know about, subliminal messaging and stuff like that? She's like, he knows absolutely nothing about it. And Fredwin sits there and is about to begin talking to him about it. And then when we cut back to him later on, he's still having a conversation about conspiracy theories and stuff like that, kind of talking Love's ear off to a certain extent. It was actually it was very sweet. And, you know, Janice is talking to her younger self. Her younger self is like, no, you can't let him go. Because it's like, you can't let him go because, like, you're a wife and a mother. That's all you have. Like, basically, like, when Lev passes away, because your son is old enough, he doesn't need you anymore. And, like, the fact of the matter is, if Lev's gone, like, you won't have anything. Like, basically, your entire identity is represented by being a mother and, wife, and if you take this away, that foundation goes away, and it's like, what do you have? And she's like, but also it's like, it's also because her younger self is like, but you can't do that to me. It's like, but the fact of the matter is, it's not to you. Like, the fact is, this is a choice I have to make, not you. You have your entire life to spend with Lev, and the fact is, and then eventually you'll be in this position, you know, letting go the person that you love. Like, the fact of the matter is, I have a lot more life to live, and I got to find some way to kind of live on without him, you know? And the fact is, because and I think that was kind of a growing thing too for Janice, because, like, she was never ready to let go of Lev, and now she felt like, no, like, I think because of everything, she finally was ready to let him go. And Fredwin was like, should I stay or should I go? But I feel like I should stay, or should I not say anything? She's like, you can stay, but he's like, I'm gonna stay. And then, you know, it's like, the fact is, you're somewhat, he can't be here, but Ben wants to let you know that he loves you. And I want you to imagine that he's like, you know, he can't be here, but he's holding your hand. And Fredwin holds Lev's hand, because he had actually said to Lev, he's like, I'm sorry that we didn't actually get to, you know, meet and get to talk. And I was like, and the fact is, him holding Lev's hand too, and you can tell it meant the world to Janice. I was like, God, this is such a beautiful moment. It's like, no, and it's so heartbreaking because you have to let go of your partner, man. It's like, I told you before, I'm a sucker for a love story, and it's just like, for, you know, it's hard. I think it's always heartbreaking with Jesus, I'm getting teary-eyed just talking about it, because it just made me think about, like, you know, it kind of makes me think of my own, like, grandparents, because, you know, my grandmother passed, well, in the case of, like, you know, on both sides, my grandmother passed away. Like, you know, I was closer to sadly closer to both my grandmother and grandfather on my dad's side. So it's like, my grandmother, you know, my dad's mom passed like years before and it's just always a thing of, like, having to, dad is always just, like, the saddest thing to me, just, like, having to carry on, like basically your other half is gone, and it's like, ugh! Like I said, I'm actually tearing up a little bit. I'm glad this isn't video, because I wouldn't want you to see me like that, because I'm a big sap. I apologize. Like, I don't know. I think I'm sappy for beautiful stuff like that. I'm a big old softy when it comes to stuff like that. Regardless, the fact is, the funeral and everything, you know, for her, you know, Janice kind of says, like, the fact is that she's going to continue to love and miss Lev, you know, and that's what she's going to do, because she's like, yeah, maybe I don't know what I'm good at without him around. Maybe he was good at all this stuff and I didn't need to be, but, you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to love and I'm going to miss him. So it was a beautiful service and everything. And basically after, you know, and it's like, the fact is, because, like, Peter tried to hug Fredwin, like, at the Continental, like, earlier in the episode, but Fredwin was like, no. But then, like, when it came to he hugged Janice. I was like, oh, wait, what? But then later on, he hugged Peter too. So it's like, oh, like, Fredwin handed everyone their files. It's like, yeah, he's like, don't worry, I didn't look. Okay, actually, I skimmed them a little bit, but I figured, like, when it was all said and done, you all would want your files. And basically, I think because of that moment going forward, like, we don't know how much time passed, but it seemed like they all kind of went their separate ways. Especially now that the game was over, it's like, it's sadly that thing of, like, this adventure and stuff, like, bound you together. That was kind of the whole point of the game, but at the same time, it's like, now because of everything, the complications between everyone, you're kind of a little separate. Like, Janice is going through with this whole losing Lev thing, and that's a big change in her life. Peter and Simone kind of had the very complicated situation they're in right now. And Fredwin, I think, is just kind of like, sadly, he's kind of always been on his own, and everyone else is figuring out their stuff. So, he's got his own stuff to kind of figure out as well. And I like the whole Lee situation because, like, I'm assuming it's in her profile, like the profiles of everyone kind of breaking down what everyone's issues is. Like, for example, like Simone being afraid to be vulnerable. For example, like, she basically thinks strength and weakness are very exclusive, not realizing that there's commonality, there's overlap between, because looking at, weakness as just, weakness, but, it's like being vulnerable with somebody is never a weakness. It can be a strength, but, sometimes strength can be a weakness because you keep up your guard so much, you don't let people in type of situation, and, Peter had just, like I said earlier, he built these walls up, a prison of his own by like forming this routine, and now he's kind of stuck in it, and because he's been stuck in this routine for so long, it's kind of become a part of who he is, and so it's hard to kind of break out of that, kind of make decisions. And I think at the end we see when he has that rice, he kind of puts it down. I think that's supposed to be him taking those steps. And Janice, someone who was so afraid of those aspects of herself that she had lost, that she had basically given up so much because of this, like that's what her younger self represented, of like, oh, this is the side of yourself that you let go, but not realizing what got filled in its place, like those parts of yourself that you might have let go to be who you are right now, to be a wife and everything, but you don't know what you gained in exchange is kind of what the point. And I thought that was beautiful. And then also Fredwin believing that there's more to it, like a guy that knows like what his obsessions, like the way he kind of like gets obsessed with certain things, like what kind of effect it has on him and everyone. But even then, it's still just a thing that he can't quite break. But it turns out in this case, he was right to kind of keep investigating, believing there was something more, because he looks into her urn and there's candy inside. So it's like, so is Clara not actually dead? Is there actually, there definitely is more to the story. So is it that Lee's hiding stuff, which maybe she is, or maybe Clara faked her death or something. Maybe Lee's in the dark about certain things. Maybe not. I don't know. But it sets up like, oh, this is far from over, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, to be fair, we kind of already know that because there's supposed to be 10 episodes in this whole situation, if I remember correctly. So it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, where the next step in this journey takes us, especially with everyone coming off the cusp of the complicated situations they've dealt with in this episode, coming back together as a team to potentially solve this mystery that's still afoot about Clara. Why the fake urn, why the fake death, potentially what that means. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.